The coffee cup shattered against the tile floor, not because she dropped it, but because Officer Derek Mareno yanked her arm so hard the porcelain exploded like a gunshot. Every head in Morrison's cafe turned. 42 people watched a uniformed cop drag a slender woman in scrubs toward the door while she said absolutely nothing. No screaming, no pleading, just that unnerving, combat-ready stillness that made the air feel thicker. He thought he was arresting some nobody nurse. He had no idea he'd just grabbed a phantom who'd stitched soldiers back together in places the Pentagon still won't name, and in exactly 97 minutes, his entire world would detonate. Before we dive in, if you want to see how this story ends, stay with me until the very last word. Like this video, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, so I can see just how far these stories travel. Now let's begin. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Ashford Heights, turning the streets into rivers of gray and the sky into a bruise that wouldn't heal. Inside Morrison's cafe on the corner of 10th and Brennan, the warmth felt like a small miracle. The espresso machine hissed, conversations hummed. A jazz quartet played softly from overhead speakers, the kind of music that made people forget the world outside was cold and unforgiving. Olivia Brennan sat alone at a corner table near the window, her back to the brick wall in a habit she'd never quite shaken. She wore navy blue scrubs from Mercy Ridge Medical Center, the name stitched in white thread above her heart. Her hair, light brown, pulled into a practical bun, was still damp from the walkover. She'd worked a 12-hour shift in the trauma ward, the kind of shift where time stopped meaning anything and every minute bled into the next. 2 gunshot wounds, 1 cardiac arrest, a child who'd swallowed drain cleaner. She'd held it together through all of it, the way she always did, and now she sat with a cappuccino and a blueberry scone, letting her nervous system remember what rest felt like. She didn't notice Officer Derek Mareno walk in, but he noticed her. Mareno was 31, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that looked like it had been carved for recruitment posters. He'd been with the Ashford Heights Police Department for 4 years, long enough to develop opinions about who belonged where and why. He scanned the cafe the way cops do, cataloging faces, exits, potential problems. His gaze snagged on Olivia. Something about her posture, the way she sat too still, like she was listening to frequencies no one else could hear. The faint shadow under her eyes. The controlled breathing. She looked out of place to him, though he couldn't have explained why. He walked toward her table. Olivia noticed him in her peripheral vision, the deliberate gait, the hand resting on his belt near the radio. She didn't look up. She took a sip of her cappuccino and watched the rain streak down the window. "Excuse me," Mareno said, stopping 2 feet from her table. She turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes with a neutral expression that gave away nothing. "Yes?" "I need to see some identification." The cafe's ambient noise seemed to dim. The woman at the next table stopped mid-sentence. The barista paused while steaming milk. Olivia set her cup down gently. "Why?" Moreno's expression hardened. "Because I asked." She studied him for a beat, his stance, the tension in his shoulders, the slight flare of his nostrils. She'd seen this dynamic play out 100 times in 100 different contexts. Authority expecting instant compliance, the unspoken threat hanging in the air like smoke. "I'm on my lunch break," she said evenly. "I haven't done anything wrong. That's not what I asked." His voice rose just enough to carry. Other patrons were watching now, phones already out, recording. "Identification, now." Olivia reached for her bag, a worn canvas messenger bag that had seen better years. She moved slowly, deliberately, the way you move when you know sudden gestures get misinterpreted. She pulled out her hospital badge and set it on the table. Mareno picked it up, squinting at the photo, then at her face. "This doesn't tell me who you are. It tells you I work at Mercy Ridge, trauma nurse. Been there 6 years. Anyone can get a fake badge." He dropped it back on the table like it was trash. "Driver's license." Olivia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She reached into her bag again, pulled out her wallet, and handed over her license. Mareno examined it with theatrical slowness, tilting it toward the light, running his thumb over the surface like he was checking for forgeries. "What are you doing here?" "Drinking coffee." "You live around here?" "Carver District, about 20 minutes east." "Long way to come for coffee." "The hospital's 4 blocks away. I come here after shifts." He handed the license back but didn't step away. "You seem nervous." Olivia almost laughed. Nervous. She'd performed emergency tracheotomies in the back of armored trucks while mortars screamed overhead. She'd held pressure on a femoral artery with one hand while calling in medevac coordinates with the other. Nervous wasn't in her operational vocabulary anymore. "I'm not nervous," she said quietly. "I'm tired." "Stand up." The words dropped like stones. Olivia didn't move. "Why?" "Because I'm telling you to." She could feel the weight of every eye in the cafe now. The phone's recording, the held breaths. She knew how this worked. Resistance, even verbal, would be framed as obstruction. Compliance would be framed as submission. There was no good move, only degrees of bad. She stood. Mareno stepped closer, invading her space in a way that was clearly intentional. "Turn around, hands on the table." "Officer, I haven't committed any crime." "Hands on the table." Olivia placed her palms flat on the wooden surface, her fingers spread. She felt his hands pat down her sides, her waist, her pockets. Rough, impersonal, designed to humiliate as much as search. She kept her breathing steady. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the same rhythm she'd used when the generators failed in Kandahar, and she'd had to finish a thoracotomy by flashlight. "What's this?" Mareno grabbed her bag. Personal belongings. He dumped the contents onto the table. Wallet, keys, lip balm, a dog-eared paperback, the things they carried, a small zippered pouch, and something else that tumbled out and caught the light. A military medical identification tag on a faded chain. Mareno picked it up, dangling it between his fingers like a piece of evidence. The tag was worn smooth in places, the engraved text barely legible. Brennan O/OPOS/no pref. "Where'd you get this?" he demanded. "It's mine." "Right." His laugh was harsh. "You expect me to believe you were military?" Olivia's eyes locked onto his. For just a second, the mask slipped. Not anger, not fear. Something colder. Something that had learned to function when everything was on fire. "I expect you to do your job properly," she said. That was the moment Moreno's control snapped. He grabbed her arm, the same arm he'd grabbed when this started, and yanked her toward the door. "You're coming with me." "On what grounds?" "Loitering, obstruction, providing false information." He was improvising now, rage filling the gaps where procedure should have been. "Maybe we'll add resisting arrest." Olivia didn't resist. She let him pull her toward the exit while her cappuccino grew cold on the table and the scone sat untouched. She could have fought back. Her hand-to-hand training was better than his, but fighting wasn't the play here. Fighting would give him exactly what he wanted, so she went silent. The rain hit them the moment they stepped outside. Cold, punishing, soaking through fabric in seconds. Moreno's patrol car was parked at the curb, lights off, engine running. He shoved her toward it, one hand gripping her upper arm hard enough to leave marks. "You're making a mistake," Olivia said. "The only mistake here is you thinking you can lie to a cop." He opened the back door and pushed her inside. The cage smelled like sweat and fear and the chemical tang of disinfectant that never quite worked. Olivia sat perfectly still, water dripping from her hair, her scrubs clinging to her skin. She watched Mareno through the metal grating as he climbed into the driver's seat and grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've got a suspicious individual in custody, transporting to the station for processing." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Unit 12? Nature of suspicion? Loitering, false identification, obstruction." There was a pause. "Did you run her ID?" Mareno hesitated. "Affirmative, came back clean, but the individual is displaying evasive behavior." "Unit 12, if the ID is clean and there's no warrant, what's the basis for detention?" "Dispatch, I'm using officer discretion. Subject was uncooperative and provided suspicious materials." Another pause, longer this time. "Acknowledged. Bring her in." Mareno dropped the radio and pulled into traffic. Olivia stared out the rain-streaked window, watching Ashford Heights blur past. The coffee shop. The boutique that sold overpriced candles. The sandwich place where hospital staff grabbed lunch. Normal life. The kind of life she'd fought to protect in places most people couldn't find on a map. "You've got nothing to say now?" Mareno asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Olivia met his eyes. I've said everything that matters. You think you're smart. I think you're scared. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Scared of what? Of being wrong. The station appeared ahead, a squat concrete building with narrow windows and too many cameras. Mareno pulled into the garage, killed the engine, and dragged Olivia out of the car. She moved with him, not resisting, not complying, just existing in the space between. He walked her through a maze of hallways that smelled like burnt coffee and old paperwork, past detectives who looked up briefly and then away, past holding cells where men shouted at walls. They reached a small interrogation room. Mareno shoved her into a metal chair and cuffed one of her wrists to the table. Don't move, he said. Wasn't planning on it. He left, slamming the door behind him. Olivia sat in the fluorescent silence, her wrist aching where the cuff bit into bone. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift somewhere else. To a field hospital outside Mosul, where the sand got into everything and the wounded kept coming in waves. To a convoy that got hit by an IED and she'd spent 4 hours in the dirt, keeping a 19-year-old rifleman alive until air support arrived. To briefings in rooms with no windows where men with stars on their shoulders asked her questions about things she couldn't tell anyone else. She'd left that world behind. Or tried to. But the world had a way of finding you. The door opened. A detective walked in, older, gray at the temples, carrying a folder. He sat across from her and opened the file. Olivia Brennan, he read. Age 34. Employed at Mercy Ridge Medical Center. Clean record. No priors. No warrants. He looked up. So why are you here? Ask Officer Mareno. The detective frowned. He says you were loitering and provided false identification. I was drinking coffee. I showed him my hospital badge and driver's license. He says you had a fake military tag. Olivia's expression didn't change. It's not fake. Can you prove that? Make a phone call. To who? Department of Defense, Personnel Division. Tell them you're holding Olivia Brennan and ask them to verify my service record. The detective stared at her. You're serious? Completely. He closed the folder. Lady, I don't know what game you're playing. No game, just a phone call. You'll have your answer in 10 minutes. He studied her for a long moment, looking for cracks, for tells, for anything that suggested she was bluffing. He found nothing. I'll check it out, he said finally. He left. Olivia sat alone again. The clock on the wall ticked. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang unanswered. 40 minutes passed. Then the door opened again. Not the detective, but a woman in a press suit with a federal badge clipped to her belt. She had sharp eyes and a sharper presence. The kind of person who walked into rooms and made everyone sit straighter. Ms. Brennan, she said, I'm Agent Sarah Vance, Department of Justice. I need you to come with me. Olivia raised her cuffed wrist. I'm a little tied up. Vance pulled out a handcuff key and unlocked it in one smooth motion. Not anymore. They walked out together, past the detective, who was now standing very still with a phone pressed to his ear, past Mareno, who looked like he'd been punched in the chest, past the chief's office where raised voices leaked through the closed door. What did you tell them? Olivia asked quietly. I didn't have to tell them anything. They already knew. Vance pushed open the station's front door. A black SUV idled at the curb. Your file has flags on it, the kind that trigger alerts when someone runs your name through official channels. I didn't know that. You weren't supposed to. Vance opened the SUV's back door. Get in. Olivia climbed inside. The interior smelled like new leather and gun oil. Vance slid in beside her and tapped the driver's shoulder. The SUV pulled away from the station, merging into traffic. Where are we going? Somewhere you can dry off and drink coffee that doesn't come with handcuffs. Vance handed her a towel. We need to talk about what happens next. What does happen next? That depends. How public do you want this to get? Olivia wiped rain from her face. I just want to go back to work. That might not be possible. The footage from the cafe is already online. You're trending. Trending. Nurse arrested for drinking coffee. Cop doesn't believe her military service. It's got all the elements. Vance pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen, and turned it toward Olivia. The video had been taken from multiple angles, stitched together by someone with editing skills. Mareno grabbing her arm, the coffee shattering. Olivia's unreadable expression as he searched her bag, the military tag dangling from his fingers. Her silence as he dragged her out. The view count was climbing in real time. Jesus, Olivia whispered. It gets worse. People started digging into your background. They found gaps. Years where you don't show up anywhere. No social media, no public records. That made them curious. My service was classified. I know, but the internet doesn't care about classification. They're calling you everything from a crisis actor to a black ops medic. Conspiracy theories are multiplying faster than we can track them. Olivia handed the tablet back. So what do you want from me? Permission to set the record straight. Not all of it. We can't declassify operational details. But enough to stop this from becoming a circus. And if I say no, then Officer Mareno becomes the story. His department throws him under the bus. He loses his job, maybe faces charges, and everyone moves on. You disappear back into your life. But, Vance smiled thinly, but if we confirm even part of your background, it changes the narrative. Veteran mistreated by police. Decorated trauma surgeon humiliated in public. That story has legs. I'm not decorated, and I wasn't a surgeon. You were attached to the 75th Ranger Regiment as a physician assistant. You ran a combat support hospital in Helmand Province. You were on the medical team for task force operations that still don't have names. Vance's voice dropped. Don't sell yourself short, Captain Brennan. The title hit like a slap. Olivia hadn't heard it in 6 years. I'm not a captain anymore. No, but you were, and that matters. The SUV turned onto a quieter street, pulling into an underground garage beneath a building with no signage. They took an elevator to the 3rd floor, walked down a hallway with cameras every 20 feet, and entered a conference room where 3 other people waited. 2 men in suits, 1 woman in army dress blues with enough ribbons to tell a story. The woman stood. Captain Brennan. Olivia's spine straightened instinctively. Colonel. At ease. The colonel gestured to a chair. Sit. We have a situation. Olivia sat. The colonel remained standing. 73 minutes ago, Officer Derek Mareno detained you. 41 minutes ago, his department ran your identification through federal databases. 18 minutes ago, those queries triggered alerts at DOD, DOJ, and the Pentagon. We've been in damage control mode ever since. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, but here we are. The colonel nodded to one of the suited men, who opened a laptop and turned it toward Olivia. The screen showed internal documents. Service records, deployment histories, commendations, photos of Olivia in combat fatigues, younger, thinner, with eyes that had seen things she'd never talk about. This is what happens when someone pokes the bear, the colonel said. Your file is buried under so many layers of security that accessing it requires executive approval. Mareno's department didn't have that approval. But they tried anyway, and now we have to decide how much damage has been done. What kind of damage? The operational kind. You worked with people whose identities are still protected. You know things that remain classified. If someone starts digging deep enough into your background, they might find threads that lead somewhere we don't want them to go. Olivia's stomach tightened. I've never talked about any of it. We know. Your record is spotless. But the internet isn't interested in your discretion. They're interested in filling gaps, making connections, building narratives. And if they start asking the right questions to the wrong people, you'll have a problem. We'll have a problem, you included. One of the suited men leaned forward. Here's the play. We release a statement confirming your military service in broad terms. Physician assistant, multiple deployments, honorable discharge, no operational details, no unit specifics, just enough to shut down the conspiracy theories. And Mareno? His department is already conducting an internal review. He'll be suspended pending investigation. If the evidence supports misconduct charges, which it does, he'll be terminated and possibly prosecuted. I don't want to ruin his life. The colonel's expression softened fractionally. Captain, he made his choices. You're just the person he made them about. That's on him. Olivia looked at the faces around the table. These were people who operated in shadows, who measured consequences in terms of national security and operational integrity. They weren't asking her permission. They were informing her of decisions already made. Fine, she said. Do what you need to do. Good. The colonel closed the laptop. You'll be taken to a secure location for the next 48 hours while this plays out. After that, you can return to your life. We'll provide security if needed. I don't need security. You might. People get weird when they find out someone they know has a classified past. Olivia stood. Is that all? One more thing. The colonel walked around the table, stopping directly in front of her. What you did today, staying calm, not escalating, protecting information even when you were being mistreated. That's exactly why we trusted you in the first place. Don't think it went unnoticed. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I know. That's what makes it impressive. They shook hands. Vance led Olivia back to the elevator, back to the SUV, back into the rain that hadn't stopped falling. As they drove through Ashford Heights, Olivia watched the city scroll past and wondered how a simple coffee break had turned into this. Her phone buzzed. A text from her charge nurse. Are you okay? I saw the video. Olivia typed back. I'm fine, be back soon. But she wasn't sure that was true. The SUV pulled up to a nondescript building on the edge of town. Corporate exterior, reinforced doors, windows that didn't reflect light quite right. Vance walked her inside, through security checkpoints that scanned retinas and fingerprints, into a suite that looked like a hotel room designed by people who'd never stayed in hotels. Get some rest, Vance said. Someone will brief you in the morning. She left. Olivia stood in the center of the room, still wearing damp scrubs, still smelling like rain and disinfectant, and the cage in Mareno's patrol car. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights bleeding through the storm. Somewhere out there, Officer Derek Mareno was sitting in his own room, probably with his union rep, probably being told his career was over. Somewhere out there, people were watching videos of her on endless loops, dissecting every frame, building theories that would never be confirmed or denied. Somewhere out there, her colleagues at Mercy Ridge were wondering who the hell she really was. And somewhere out there, in places without names, the people she'd served with were probably getting calls from handlers reminding them what they could and couldn't say. Olivia closed her eyes. She'd spent 6 years building a quiet life. A normal life. The kind of life where the most stressful thing was a Tuesday shift in the trauma bay. She'd earned that peace. She'd bled for it. And Officer Derek Mareno had torn it apart in 97 minutes. Her phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from a number she didn't recognize. You don't know me, but I was in Morrison's today. Thank you for staying calm. My daughter was there. She needed to see that. Olivia stared at the message. Then another text came through, from a different number. Former Army here, saw what happened. You handled that like a pro. Semper Fi, sister. Then another. And another. Messages from strangers who'd watched the video, who'd seen something in her silence that meant something to them. She sat on the edge of the bed and read them all. By the time she finished, the rain had stopped and the city was starting to glow with the false dawn that came before sunrise. Olivia set her phone aside and lay back, staring at the ceiling, wondering what came next. But deep in her gut, under the exhaustion and the surreal weight of everything that had happened, she felt something else. A slow-burning certainty that Officer Derek Mareno had started something he couldn't stop. And the reckoning was only just beginning. The reckoning began at 6:43 the next morning when Chief Malcolm Garrett walked into the Ashford Heights Police Department with a face like carved granite and a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. He didn't greet anyone, didn't pour coffee, didn't check his messages. He went straight to his office, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the glass, and picked up his phone. Get Mareno in here. Now. 30 seconds later, Officer Derek Mareno appeared in the doorway, still in yesterday's uniform, looking like he hadn't slept. He probably hadn't. The chief gestured to a chair, but Mareno stayed standing, arms crossed, jaw tight. Sit down, Garrett said. Mareno sat. The chief opened the folder and spread its contents across his desk like playing cards. Incident reports, witness statements, screenshots from social media. A printed email with a Department of Justice letterhead, and a single photograph. Olivia Brennan in Army fatigues, standing in front of a medical tent with a combat medic patch on her shoulder and dust on her boots. Tell me what you were thinking yesterday, Garrett said quietly. I was doing my job. Your job is to protect and serve, not harass nurses during their lunch break. Mareno's face flushed. She was acting suspicious. Suspicious how? Drinking coffee, reading a book, existing while tired? Garrett tapped the photograph. This woman ran trauma operations in combat zones you've never even heard of. She saved more lives in a single deployment than you'll meet in your entire career. And you dragged her out of a cafe in handcuffs because she looked suspicious? I didn't know. You didn't ask. That's the problem. Garrett leaned back in his chair. Do you have any idea what kind of firestorm you've created? The video has 8 million views. We've had calls from the mayor's office, the city council, 3 civil rights organizations, and the goddamn Pentagon. The Pentagon, Mareno? When was the last time cops in Ashford Heights had to deal with federal oversight? Mareno said nothing. You're suspended, effective immediately. Badge and gun on my desk. Chief, I'm not finished. Garrett's voice dropped to something colder. Internal Affairs is opening a full investigation. If they find evidence of misconduct, and they will, because I've already seen the footage, you'll be terminated. If the DA decides to pursue charges, you'll be arrested. And if the feds want a piece of you, I won't stop them. Mareno stood slowly, his hands shaking as he unclipped his badge and set it on the desk. The gun followed, heavy and final. He looked at Garrett with something that might have been defiance or desperation. It was hard to tell which. She didn't even fight back, he said. No, she didn't, because unlike you, she knows what discipline looks like. Garrett picked up the badge. Get out of my office. Mareno walked out past colleagues who wouldn't meet his eyes, past the dispatch desk where conversations stopped mid-sentence, past the bullpen where someone had taped a printed screenshot of Olivia's military ID to the wall with the caption, "This is what a professional looks like." He kept walking until he reached the parking lot, climbed into his truck, and sat there staring at nothing while the engine ticked in the cold. Inside the station, Garrett made another call. This is Chief Garrett, Ashford Heights PD. I need to speak with whoever's handling the Brennan situation. The line clicked twice, then a woman's voice came through. This is Agent Vance. We just suspended the officer. Full cooperation with any investigation you want to run. Appreciated. But that's not why I'm calling you back. Garrett frowned. What do you mean? We have a bigger problem. Someone leaked Captain Brennan's deployment history. Not the classified parts, but enough to confirm where she was and when. Military forums are blowing up, journalists are making FOIA requests, and there's chatter that a documentary crew wants to interview her. Can you shut it down? We're trying, but the cat's out of the bag. The best we can do now is control the narrative. What does that mean for us? It means your department is about to become very famous for all the wrong reasons. I'd start drafting a public statement if I were you. The call ended. Garrett sat alone in his office, staring at the photograph of Olivia Brennan standing in the desert with eyes that had seen too much and survived anyway. And he wondered how one cop's ego had managed to detonate a bomb this big. Across town, in the secure suite where Olivia had spent the night, she woke to find Agent Vance sitting in the chair by the window, scrolling through a tablet. You're up, Vance said without looking over. Olivia sat up slowly, her body stiff from sleeping in strange beds and tension she couldn't quite shake. What time is it? Almost 7. Coffee's on the counter. Real coffee, not the station sludge. Olivia poured herself a cup and sat on the edge of the bed. The suite smelled fondly of industrial carpet and air conditioning that ran too cold. Outside, the city was waking up, delivery trucks rumbling past, early commuters hustling toward office buildings, the ordinary machinery of life grinding forward. How bad is it? Olivia asked. Vance set the tablet aside. On a scale of 1 to 10? 15? That's not a scale. Welcome to viral hell. Vance pulled up a news site and turned the screen toward Olivia. The headline read, Veteran nurse detained by police after military service questioned. Video sparks outrage. Below it, 3 videos played simultaneously. The cafe footage. A local news anchor interviewing people on the street. A clip of Chief Garrett walking into the station looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. They're running with it, Vance said. Every network, every platform, you're the lead story. Olivia set her coffee down. I didn't want to be the lead story. I know, but you are. And now we have to decide how you handle it. I go back to work. I do my job. I ignore the noise. Vance shook her head. That won't work. You try to go back to Mercy Ridge. You'll have cameras waiting in the parking lot, reporters shouting questions. activists wanting statements. It'll turn into a circus. So what am I supposed to do? We're working on a plan, but first, there's something you need to see. Vance opened another tab. This one showed a military forum, veterans discussing the incident, sharing their own stories of being mistreated or ignored or dismissed after coming home. The thread had 14,000 replies and counting. Olivia scrolled through them. I was in Helmand. If Captain Brennan was running CSH ops there, she saw some of the worst casualties of the war. Total respect. My wife's a nurse. She deals with this kind of disrespect every shift. Glad someone's finally paying attention. Mareno's a disgrace. Badge or no badge, you don't treat people like that. Anyone else notice how calm she stayed? That's training. That's discipline. That's someone who's been through worse. Olivia handed the tablet back. They're making me into something I'm not. They're making you into what they need you to be. A symbol. A story that fits their experience. Vance paused. The question is whether you let them, or whether you take control of it yourself. I don't want control. I want my life back. Then you're going to be disappointed. The words hung in the air like smoke. Olivia stood and walked to the window. Below, traffic moved in sluggish rivers. People crossed streets, bought coffee, checked phones, lived their small, invisible lives. She'd fought to have that, the mundane privilege of anonymity. And now it was gone, stripped away by a cop who'd decided she didn't belong. There's another option, Vance said quietly. Which is? You give one interview, controlled, scripted. You tell your story on your terms, then you walk away. We make it clear you're not available for follow-ups, no book deals, no speaking tours, just one conversation that sets the record straight. And if I say no, then the story writes itself without you. People fill in the gaps with speculation. Conspiracy theories multiply. And somewhere down the line, someone digs too deep and finds something we can't let them find. Olivia turned from the window. You're saying I don't have a choice. I'm saying your choices have consequences. Pick the one you can live with. Before Olivia could respond, Vance's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. Vance? A pause. When? Another pause. I'll tell her. She hung up. What? Olivia asked. Mareno just posted a statement on social media. He's apologizing. For what? Vance pulled it up and read aloud. I made a serious error in judgment yesterday. I let my assumptions override my training, and I treated someone with disrespect and suspicion they didn't deserve. Captain Olivia Brennan served this country with honor, and I failed to recognize that. I take full responsibility for my actions and accept whatever consequences follow. I'm deeply sorry. Olivia stared at her. He called me captain. He did. How does he even know that? Because it's all over the internet now. Someone leaked your rank and deployment dates. Not the classified stuff, but enough. Olivia felt something cold settle in her chest. Who leaked it? We're trying to find out, but the damage is done. She sat down hard, the weight of it pressing against her ribs. Her rank, her deployments, details she'd buried under 6 years of civilian life, now floating in the digital ether where anyone could see them. Former colleagues would know. Patients at Mercy Ridge would know. Strangers on the street would know. The invisibility she had built so carefully was shattered. I need to see Mareno, she said suddenly. Vance blinked. What? I need to talk to him, face to face. That's a terrible idea. I don't care. Set it up. Olivia, I'm not asking. Vance studied her for a long moment, then sighed. I'll make a call, but if this goes sideways, it's on you. 2 hours later, Olivia sat in a different room, this one inside the Ashford Heights Police Department, windowless and gray, with a table bolted to the floor and cameras in every corner. Agent Vance stood by the door. Chief Garrett sat in the corner with his arms crossed, watching everything with the intensity of a man waiting for disaster. The door opened. Derek Mareno walked in. He looked smaller somehow, like the uniform had been holding him together, and now, in civilian clothes, jeans, a faded jacket, sneakers, he was just a man who'd made a catastrophic mistake. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets. He stopped 3 feet from the table. Sit, Garrett said. Mareno sat. Olivia studied him across the scarred metal surface. She'd thought about this moment during the drive over, tried to prepare for what she'd feel. Anger, maybe. Satisfaction. The quiet vindication of watching someone who'd hurt her face consequences. But looking at him now, she felt something else. Exhaustion. "You wanted to see me," Mareno said quietly. "I did." "Why?" Olivia leaned forward slightly. "Because I need to understand what you saw when you looked at me." Moreno's jaw worked. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Silence stretched between them. "I saw someone who didn't fit," he said finally. "Someone who seemed out of place. And I made assumptions." "What kind of assumptions?" "That you were, I don't know, suspicious. A problem." "Why?" "Because you were too calm. Too controlled. People don't act like that unless they're hiding something." Olivia almost laughed. "Or unless they've been trained to stay calm under pressure." Mareno looked down at his hands. "I know that now." "Do you? Or are you just sorry you got caught?" His head snapped up. "I'm sorry I hurt you." "You didn't hurt me. You inconvenienced me. There's a difference." Olivia's voice was steady, clinical. "What you hurt was your career, your reputation, your department's credibility. Those are the things you're actually sorry about." Moreno's face flushed. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Olivia's composure cracked just enough to let something sharp through. "You grabbed me in a public space. You searched me like a criminal. You threw me in a cage because I didn't perform deference the way you wanted. And now you want to talk about fair?" "I made a mistake. You made a choice. Choices have weight. You don't get to apologize your way out of that weight." Garrett shifted in his corner. Vance's expression remained neutral, but her eyes were locked on Olivia. Mareno swallowed hard. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing. I want you to understand what you did. Not to me specifically, but to everyone who looks at a badge and wonders if the person wearing it sees them as human or as a threat." "I see you as human. Now you do." "Yesterday I was just a problem to be solved." Mareno opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no defense, no argument that wouldn't make it worse. Olivia stood. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came here to see if you actually understand what happened. I'm still not sure you do." She walked toward the door. "Captain Brennan," Mareno said. She stopped but didn't turn around. "For what it's worth," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "I wish I'd just let you drink your coffee." Olivia looked back over her shoulder. "So do I." She left. Vance followed her into the hallway, past officers who watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to shame. They walked out of the station into daylight that felt too bright, too ordinary for the moment. "Feel better?" Vance asked. "No." "Good. That means you're human." They climbed into the waiting SUV. As it pulled away from the station, Olivia watched the building shrink in the side mirror and wondered if Mareno would learn anything from this, or if he'd just become another cautionary tale people told at training seminars. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Sarah Mendez, the head of Mercy Ridge's trauma department. "When you're ready to come back, your spot is waiting. Take your time." Another text from a number she didn't recognize. "I'm a reporter with the Ashford Chronicle. Would love to talk. On the record or off, your choice." Another. "You're a hero. Don't let them make you into anything less." She turned the phone off. "Where to?" Vance asked. "I don't know. Somewhere quiet." Quiet's going to be hard to find for a while. The SUV merged onto the highway, heading out of Ashford Heights toward the outskirts where the city gave way to hills and sparse trees. They drove in silence for 20 minutes until Vance's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression changed. "When?" she asked. "How many?" A pause. "We're en route." She hung up and leaned forward. "Change of plans. Take us to Mercy Ridge." The driver nodded and changed lanes. Olivia sat up. "What's happening?" "Mass casualty event, chemical plant explosion on the east side. They're calling in every available medical professional." "How bad?" "Bad enough that they're asking for you specifically." Olivia's training kicked in like a switch flipping. The exhaustion, the anger, the surreal weight of the last 24 hours. All of it got filed away into a compartment she'd keep locked until later. Right now, people were hurt. That was all that mattered. How far? She asked. 15 minutes. Make it 10. The driver's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. They arrived at Mercy Ridge Medical Center to controlled chaos. Ambulances lined up at the emergency bay. Gurneys rolled through automatic doors. Nurses shouted instructions. The smell of smoke and chemicals hung in the air like a ghost. Olivia jumped out before the SUV fully stopped. Dr. Mendez met her at the entrance, already in scrubs, already moving. Brennan. Thank God. What do we have? Explosion at the Riverside chemical plant. At least 40 injured, more coming. Burns, inhalation injuries, crush trauma. We're setting up triage in the main hall. Where do you need me? Trauma Bay 2. We've got a critical with bilateral leg fractures and possible internal bleeding. She's asking for you. Olivia stopped. Asking for me? Mendez handed her scrubs. Says she saw you on the news, says she trusts you. I don't ask questions when patients have preferences. I just try to keep them alive. Olivia changed in 30 seconds, scrubbed in 45, and walked into Trauma Bay 2 to find a woman in her mid-20s on the table, covered in soot and blood, conscious but fading. You're her, the woman whispered. The one from the video. Olivia moved to her side, checking vitals, assessing injuries with the clinical precision that had kept soldiers alive in places with no power and no backup. I'm a nurse. That's all that matters right now. You stayed calm. When he grabbed you, you didn't fight back. I had no reason to fight. I would have fought. Olivia met her eyes. Fighting isn't always the answer. Sometimes you survive by staying still. The woman's breathing was shallow, labored, blood pressure dropping, pupils uneven. I need a trauma team in here now, Olivia called out. Possible splenic rupture, decreased BP, signs of hypovolemic shock. Doctors flooded in. Olivia stepped back, letting them take over, but the woman's hand shot out and grabbed hers. Don't leave. I'm not going anywhere. For the next 6 hours, Olivia worked without stopping. She stabilized fractures, managed airways, coordinated blood transfusions, talked frightened patients through pain they'd never imagined. She moved through the chaos with the same controlled precision she'd used in field hospitals, where the wounded arrived faster than they could be counted. This was what she knew. This was what she was built for. By the time the last critical patient was stabilized and transferred to ICU, the sun had set and Olivia's scrubs were stained with other people's blood. She washed her hands in a utility sink, watching pink water spiral down the drain, and tried to remember when she'd last eaten. Dr. Mendez found her in the break room, sitting alone with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. You saved 3 lives today, Mendez said. Maybe 4, if Martinez pulls through. We saved them. Team effort. Don't deflect. You're allowed to take credit. Mendez sat down. That woman in trauma, too? She told me you were the reason she stayed calm long enough for us to stabilize her. Said if you could handle being arrested with that kind of composure, she could handle a little surgery. Olivia smiled faintly. I wasn't that composed. You were, and people noticed. Mendez paused. The video's still everywhere. Patients are asking about you. Some of them specifically requested you today. I just want to work. I know, but you're not just a nurse anymore. Like it or not, you're something else now. What? A reminder that quiet strength is still strength. Before Olivia could respond, Agent Vance appeared in the doorway. We need to go, she said. Olivia stood. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but there's someone who wants to meet you. Who? Vance's expression was unreadable. You'll see. They drove through Ashford Heights as night settled over the city, streetlights flickering on in sequence like dominoes. Vance wouldn't answer questions, wouldn't explain, just kept checking her phone and murmuring responses to messages Olivia couldn't see. They pulled up to a hotel downtown, the kind with marble lobbies and doormen in uniforms. Vance led Olivia inside, past the front desk, into an elevator that required a key card to access the top floor. The doors opened onto a hallway with exactly one door. Vance knocked. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled back, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Olivia made in a month. Her eyes were sharp and assessing. Captain Brennan, she said, I'm Senator Patricia Whitmore. I've been trying to reach you. Olivia glanced at Vance, who offered no help. "Senator," Olivia said carefully, "why?" Whitmore stepped aside. "Because I think we can help each other. Please come in." Olivia walked into a suite that overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Ashford Heights in a grid of lights and shadows. Whitmore gestured to a chair. "I'll stand," Olivia said. "Suit yourself." Whitmore poured herself a drink. "I've been watching what happened to you, the arrest, the aftermath, the explosion today. You've had quite a week." "I've had worse." "I know you have. I've read your file, or the parts they'd let me read." Whitmore took a sip. "I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I've spent the last decade fighting for better treatment of veterans, better health care, better transition support, and what happened to you is exactly the kind of story that makes people pay attention." "I'm not a story." "You are now, and you can either let other people write it, or you can write it yourself." Olivia's patience was wearing thin. "What do you want, Senator?" "I want you to testify." The room went very quiet. "Testify about what?" Olivia asked. "About what it's like to serve your country and then be treated like a threat when you come home. About the gaps in support systems. About the way veterans, especially women veterans, are overlooked and undervalued." Whitmore set her glass down. "I'm holding hearings next month. Your testimony could change policy, could save lives." "I'm not a policy expert." "You're a living example. That's more powerful than any expert testimony." Olivia shook her head. "I don't want to be a symbol. Too late." "You already are. The only question is what you do with it." "I do my job. I go back to being invisible." Whitmore studied her with something that might have been sympathy. "Captain, you were never invisible. You were just good at pretending to be. But now the world sees you, and you have a choice. Use that visibility to make things better, or waste it trying to disappear again." Olivia looked at Vance, who remained carefully neutral. "I need time to think," Olivia said. "You have 48 hours. After that, I'm holding the hearing with or without you." Whitmore walked to the window. "You know what I see when I look at this city? I see thousands of people like you. Veterans who came home and tried to blend in, who took jobs that didn't use half their skills, who stayed quiet because they thought that's what they were supposed to do. And I see a system that let them down. One testimony won't fix the system." "No, but it's a start." Whitmore turned back. "Think about it. That's all I ask." Olivia left without another word. Vance followed her into the elevator, and they descended in silence. When they reached the lobby, Olivia finally spoke. "You knew she was going to ambush me. I knew she wanted to talk to you. I didn't know what she'd say. You could have warned me." "Would you have come if I had?" Olivia didn't answer. They walked out into the night. The SUV was gone. Vance must have dismissed it. So they stood on the sidewalk while the city moved around them, oblivious and infinite. "What are you going to do?" Vance asked. "I don't know." "You're lying." Olivia looked at her. "What makes you say that?" "Because I've read your file too, and people like you don't spend 6 years hiding just to jump back into the spotlight. You've already decided." "Then why ask?" "Because I'm hoping you'll surprise me." Olivia's phone buzzed. She pulled it out expecting another reporter, another well-wisher, another stranger with opinions about her life. Instead, it was a text from a number she recognized, a number she hadn't seen in 3 years. Saw what happened. "Are you okay?" "Marcus." She stared at the screen. Marcus Reeves. Captain. Ranger. Someone she'd served with in places they'd both agreed never to talk about. She typed back, "I'm fine, just noise." His response came immediately. "It's not just noise. People are listening. Make it count." Olivia put the phone away. Vance was watching her. "Who was that?" "Someone from before." "Before what?" "Before I tried to be normal." They stood there while the city breathed around them, and somewhere in the distance a siren wailed, and someone's Friday night was getting worse while someone else's was just beginning, and the ordinary machinery of life kept grinding forward because it always did, no matter who fell through the cracks. "I should go," Olivia said. "Where?" "Somewhere that isn't here." But before she could move, Vance's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. Say that again. A pause. When? Another pause. We'll be there in 10. She hung up and grabbed Olivia's arm. What? Olivia asked. It's Mareno. He's at Mercy Ridge. He's asking for you. Why? Vance's expression was grim. Because he just tried to kill himself. The SUV materialized at the curb within 90 seconds. Engine already running, driver stone-faced and silent. Olivia didn't ask questions. She climbed in beside Vance and the vehicle launched into traffic with the kind of urgency that made other cars swerve aside. Red lights became suggestions. Speed limits turned abstract. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow, while Vance worked her phone with the focused intensity of someone trying to prevent a disaster that had already started. How bad? Olivia asked. Overdose, pills. His sister found him in his apartment 20 minutes ago. Vance didn't look up from her screen. Paramedics got him conscious, but he's not stable. He kept saying your name. Why would he do that? You tell me. You're the one who read him the riot act 3 hours ago. Olivia's stomach twisted. She'd confronted Mareno because she needed him to understand the weight of his actions, needed him to see past his own defensive reflex to the actual harm he'd caused. She hadn't meant to break him, hadn't thought her words carried that kind of power. But maybe she'd been wrong. The SUV screeched into Mercy Ridge's emergency bay, where ambulances still idled from the chemical plant disaster. Staff were clearing equipment, restocking supplies, running on fumes and adrenaline. Olivia jumped out before the vehicle stopped and pushed through the automatic doors into the organized chaos of the ER. Dr. Mendez spotted her immediately. Trauma 3. He's asking for you, but he's barely coherent. What did he take? Benzodiazepines, a lot of them. We've got him on flumazenil, but his respiratory drive is compromised. If he crashes again, we're intubating. Olivia moved fast, Vance trailing behind, weaving through gurneys and medical equipment until she reached Trauma Bay 3. Inside, Derek Mareno lay on a gurney with an IV in each arm, oxygen mask fogged with shallow breaths, eyes half open and unfocused. A nurse monitored vitals while another adjusted the drip rate. The cardiac monitor beeped irregularly, each tone a small reminder that he was still on the wrong side of stable. Olivia stepped to the bedside. Moreno's eyes tracked toward her, struggling to focus. His lips moved behind the mask. She leaned closer. I'm here. Sorry, he whispered. The word came out slurred, fractured. So sorry. Save your energy. You need to breathe. Ruined everything. His hand lifted weakly, reaching for nothing. Career. Reputation. You. You didn't ruin me. Made you a target. Made you famous. His breathing hitched. Didn't know. The cardiac monitor's rhythm stuttered. The nurse's hand moved toward the crash cart. Derek, Olivia said sharply, using his first name for the first time. Look at me. His eyes found hers. You made a mistake. A bad one. But this... She gestured at the IVs, the monitors, the chemical cocktail keeping him alive. This doesn't fix anything. This just makes it worse. Already worse. Can't take it back. No, you can't. But you can do better. You can learn. You can become someone who doesn't make that mistake again. She gripped the bed rail. But you have to stay alive to do it. Moreno's eyes filled with something that might have been tears or just the involuntary response of a body under chemical siege. Why do you care? Because despite everything, I don't want you dead. His hand found hers on the rail, fingers cold and trembling. I saw the video, over and over. Saw what I did, how I looked, like a bully, like everything I said I'd never become. Then don't become it. Make different choices. Too late? It's only too late when you stop breathing. Everything else is just hard. The monitor's rhythm stabilized slightly. The nurse glanced at Olivia with something like approval. Moreno's grip loosened as the sedative effects pulled him back under. Stay, he mumbled. Please. Olivia looked at Dr. Mendez, who nodded from the doorway. I'll stay until you're stable, Olivia said. But then you do the work. You get better. You face what comes next. Understood? Moreno's eyes closed. His breathing deepened slightly, the oxygen mask fogging in more regular intervals. Olivia stepped back, letting the medical team take over. She walked out of the trauma bay into the hallway where Vance waited with arms crossed and an expression that gave away nothing. "That was either very compassionate or very stupid," Vance said. "Maybe both." "You know this complicates everything. The narrative was clean. Bad cop, wronged veteran, justice served. Now he's sympathetic. Now he's a victim too. He tried to kill himself because he couldn't handle the consequences of his own actions. That's not my problem to solve. Except you just made it your problem by being here, by holding his hand, by giving him comfort." Vance's voice dropped. "The cameras in the ER caught all of it. By morning, there'll be headlines about the veteran who forgave the cop who arrested her." "I didn't forgive him." "Doesn't matter. Optics are optics." Olivia leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up. 24 hours ago, she'd been drinking coffee. Now she was standing in a hospital corridor while the man who'd arrested her clung to life 3 rooms away, and a senator wanted her to testify, and the internet had decided she was either a hero or a symbol or a cautionary tale depending on who was telling the story. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Marcus. "Heard about Mareno. You good?" She didn't know how to answer that. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Chief Garrett appeared, looking like he'd aged another decade in the past few hours. He stopped when he saw Olivia. "Is he going to make it?" Garrett asked. "Probably, if he doesn't crash again." Garrett's shoulders sagged with relief he was trying hard not to show. "His sister called me, said he'd been spiraling since the suspension. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Just kept watching that video and reading comments. The internet's not kind." Neither was I." Garrett met her eyes. "I came down hard on him, had to. But maybe I should have seen this coming. You're not responsible for his choices, aren't I? I'm his commanding officer. Part of my job is knowing when my people are breaking." Olivia understood that burden. She'd carried it in places where breaking meant more than just a career ending, where it meant someone didn't come home. "You can't save everyone from themselves." "Doesn't stop me from trying." Agent Vance's phone rang. She stepped away to answer it, her voice dropping to urgent whispers that didn't carry. Garrett watched her go, then looked back at Olivia. "Can I ask you something? Why did you come? After everything he did to you, why rush to his bedside?" Olivia was quiet for a moment, searching for words that fit. "Because I've seen what happens when people don't have anyone show up, when they're alone with their worst thoughts and no way out. I didn't want that for him, even if he wanted it for himself. That's more grace than most people would give. It's not grace, it's just refusing to let his mistakes define my choices." Vance returned, her expression tight. "We need to go. Now." "What's wrong?" Olivia asked. "The Pentagon just called. There's been a development." Garrett straightened. "What kind of development?" "The classified kind. Captain Brennan, you're being recalled." The words landed like a physical blow. Olivia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Recalled. That wasn't a request. That wasn't a suggestion. That was an order carrying the full weight of military authority she'd thought she'd left behind. "Recalled for what?" she demanded. "They didn't say. Just that your presence is required in Washington by 0800 tomorrow. I'm a civilian. Your separation papers have a clause. Inactive reserve status with potential recall for specialized operations. You signed it." Olivia had signed it. Years ago, in an office that smelled like old coffee and government furniture, when leaving the military meant agreeing to stay tethered just in case they needed her particular set of skills. She'd thought it was a formality, insurance the Pentagon would never cash in. She'd been wrong. "I can't just leave," Olivia said. "I have patients, responsibilities. Dr. Mendez is already being briefed. Your shifts are covered. Everything's handled. How is that possible? You just found out." Vance's expression was grim. "We didn't just find out. We've known for 3 hours. We were trying to figure out how to tell you." Olivia's mind raced through implications. 3 hours ago, she'd been confronting Mareno in the police station, which meant the recall order had come through while she was busy trying to make him understand accountability. Which meant someone in Washington had been watching this whole situation unfold and decided it was time to pull her back in. "What do they want?" Olivia asked. "I don't know. But when the Pentagon issues recall orders through DOJ channels, It's not for a social call. Garrett stepped forward. If you're being recalled, that changes things here. Mareno's case, the investigation, all of it. How? Because if you're active military again, even temporarily, you're protected by different regulations. Civilian complaints become more complicated. Federal jurisdiction kicks in. The whole legal framework shifts. Olivia's head was spinning. They're using me. They're protecting you, Vance corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Before Vance could answer, Dr. Mendez appeared in the hallway. Brennan, Mareno's stable. We're moving him to ICU for observation, but he's out of immediate danger. Can I see him? He's unconscious, won't be awake for hours. Then leave him a message. Tell him I kept my word. I stayed until he was stable. Mendez nodded and disappeared back into the trauma bay. Olivia turned to Vance. How long do I have? Transport leaves at 0500. That gives you about 7 hours. For what? To sleep, to pack, to say goodbye to whatever you need to say goodbye to. Vance paused. This recall could be temporary, could be weeks, could be longer. They don't tell us everything. Olivia thought about her apartment in the Carver district, the place she'd built into something resembling a home. The plants that needed watering, the cat that belonged to her neighbor but visited anyway. The life she'd carefully constructed around 8-hour shifts and quiet weekends. All of it suddenly felt very fragile. I need to make a call, Olivia said. She walked outside into the parking lot, where the night air was cold and sharp, and the city hummed with Friday night energy. She pulled out her phone and dialed Marcus Reeves. He answered on the second ring. Talk to me. They're recalling me. Silence. Then, when? Washington, tomorrow morning. Do you know why? No. Do you? No. But if they're pulling you in this fast, it's either very bad or very specialized. He paused. How are you holding up? I don't know yet. Ask me in 12 hours. Olivia. His voice softened in a way it rarely did. Whatever this is, you can handle it. You've handled worse. Have I? Kandahar, Mosul, that field hospital outside Jalalabad where we lost power for 16 hours and you kept 3 critical patients alive with manual ventilation and a flashlight. Yes, you've handled worse. She closed her eyes, remembering those nights. The weight of responsibility that felt like it would crush her. The decisions that meant life or death and no time to second guess. The moment-to-moment existence where nothing mattered except the next breath, the next heartbeat, the next second of staying alive. I thought I was done with that world, she said. The world's not done with you. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. It's just true. He paused. You want me to make some calls, see what I can find out? Would it help? Probably not, but I'll do it anyway. Thanks, Marcus. Hey, we look out for our own. You know that. She hung up and stood in the parking lot watching ambulances come and go, watching people arrive in crisis and leave in relief or grief or the complicated space between. The hospital never stopped. The city never stopped. The machinery of life kept grinding forward regardless of who got pulled into its gears. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Senator Whitmore. Heard about the recall. This changes things. Call me. Olivia deleted the message. Another text came through, this one from a blocked number. You're making enemies in high places. Watch your back. She stared at it, trying to decode whether it was a threat or a warning or just another internet troll with too much time. She deleted that one too. Agent Vance emerged from the hospital. We should go. You need rest before tomorrow. I need answers. You'll get them in Washington. Will I? Vance didn't respond to that. They drove through Ashford Heights one more time, past Morrison's Cafe where this had all started, past the police station where Mareno was now absent, past the neighborhoods where people lived ordinary lives without federal agents and recall orders and viral videos that turned privacy into a commodity. The SUV pulled up to Olivia's apartment building in the Carver district. The lights were still on in Mrs. Patterson's window on the 3rd floor. The corner store was closing up for the night. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 48 hours ago, but nothing felt the same. I'll pick you up at 04:30, Vance said. Pack light, dress comfortable. Expect to be gone at least a week. A week. Minimum? Maybe longer. Olivia climbed out and stood on the sidewalk while the SUV pulled away. She walked up 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped into the space she'd called home for the past 6 years. It was small, efficient, a studio with a kitchen alcove and a bathroom that had decent water pressure. Books lined one wall, medical journals stacked on the coffee table. A photograph of her in uniform, younger and harder, tucked in a drawer she rarely opened. She pulled out a duffel bag and started packing clothes, toiletries, the things you need when you don't know where you're going or how long you'll be there. She worked on autopilot, the muscle memory of someone who'd packed for deployments before and knew the rhythm. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Captain Brennan?" A male voice, unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "Colonel James Hartford. I'm calling from Joint Base Andrews. I'm briefing you tomorrow at 0900. "On what?" "That's classified until you're in the room, but I can tell you this much. We have a situation that requires someone with your specific background. Medical trauma expertise combined with operational security clearance and field experience in hostile environments. There are a lot of people with that background. Not many. And none currently available who also have your exact deployment history." He paused. "I've read your file, Captain. I know what you did in Helmand. I know about the night you kept an entire platoon alive after their convoy got hit. I know you operated for 6 hours straight while under fire. That was a long time ago. Skills like that don't expire, they just go dormant." Olivia sat on the edge of her bed. "What's the situation?" "Can't discuss it over an open line, but it's significant and it's time sensitive. We need you wheels up by tomorrow afternoon." "Wheels up to where?" "That's part of the briefing." She closed her eyes. "What if I refuse?" "You won't. You sound very sure." "I am. Because I know your record. I know you don't leave people behind. And right now there are people who need exactly what you can provide." His voice softened slightly. "I'm not ordering you, Captain. I'm asking, because this matters." Olivia's hand tightened on the phone. She'd spent 6 years running from this exact moment. 6 years building a life where the stakes were measured in vitals and lab results instead of mortars and casualties. 6 years trying to be normal. But normal was a luxury people like her didn't get to keep. "I'll be there," she said. "Thank you, Captain. Transport's been arranged. Agent Vance will get you to Andrews by 0700. Rest if you can." He hung up. Olivia set the phone down and stared at the duffel bag, half packed, sitting on her bed, like a portal to a world she'd tried to leave behind. She thought about Mareno in the ICU, fighting to stay alive after realizing the weight of his mistakes. She thought about the patients at Mercy Ridge, who'd requested her specifically because they'd seen her stay calm under pressure. She thought about Senator Whitmore, who wanted her to testify. She thought about Marcus and the others still serving who'd never stopped carrying the burden. She thought about the person she'd been before she became a nurse. The captain who'd made impossible decisions in impossible situations. The medic who'd learned to function when everything was on fire. That person wasn't gone, just buried under 6 years of pretending. She finished packing. At 04:15, she walked down to the street with her duffel bag and a go-cup of coffee that was too strong and too hot. The city was still dark, the hour when night staff went home and day shift wasn't quite ready to start. Streetlights cast long shadows. A delivery truck rumbled past. The SUV appeared exactly on time. Vance was in the back seat, looking like she'd never slept. "Ready?" "No, but let's go anyway." They drove to a private airfield on the outskirts of Ashford Heights, where a military transport waited with engines already running. No commercial terminal, no security theater. Just a chain-link fence and a guard who checked credentials with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Olivia climbed aboard to find the interior configured for personnel transport. Jump seats lined both walls. Cargo netting covered equipment she couldn't identify. 2 other passengers were already strapped in, both in uniform, both avoiding eye contact. Vance stayed on the tarmac. "Good luck, Captain." "You're not coming?" "This is where my jurisdiction ends and theirs begins." She handed Olivia a card. "If you need anything, call that number. It'll reach me no matter where you are." "Even classified locations?" "Especially classified locations." The loadmaster signaled it was time. Olivia strapped into a jump seat. The rear ramp closed with hydraulic finality. The engines roared. The aircraft lurched forward, taxied, and punched into the pre-dawn sky with the kind of acceleration that pressed you into your seat and reminded you that you were no longer in control. Olivia watched through a porthole as Ashford Heights shrank below, the city lights becoming a grid of glowing lines against the darkness. Somewhere down there, Mareno was waking up in the ICU. Somewhere down there, doctor. Mendez was starting another shift. Somewhere down there, people were drinking coffee in Morrison's cafe and living lives that didn't involve federal agents and recall orders. The aircraft banked east toward Washington, toward whatever situation required her specific combination of skills and clearances. One of the uniformed passengers leaned over. First time back? Back where? Into the shit. He smiled without humor. It's written all over your face. That look of someone who thought they were done. I am done. Then why are you on this bird? Olivia didn't have an answer for that. They flew for 3 hours. Olivia dozed fitfully, her mind cycling through scenarios, trying to guess what crisis required pulling her out of civilian life. Medical emergency? Outbreak? Hostage situation with casualties? The aircraft descended through cloud cover and touched down at Joint Base Andrews with the controlled violence of a military landing. The ramp dropped. Morning sunlight poured in, sharp and unforgiving. Colonel Hartford waited on the tarmac, silver eagles on his shoulders, expression neutral. Captain Brennan, welcome back. Sir? Walk with me. They crossed the tarmac to a waiting vehicle, climbed in, and drove deeper into the base. Past hangars, past formations running morning PT, past the infrastructure of military life that Olivia had thought she'd left behind. They stopped at a nondescript building with no windows and too many cameras. Inside, through security checkpoints that scanned everything, into a briefing room where 3 other officers waited around a table covered in classified folders. Hartford gestured to a seat. Sit. Olivia sat. He opened a folder and turned it toward her. Inside were photographs. A compound in a desert location she didn't recognize. American personnel in civilian clothes. And casualties. A lot of casualties. 48 hours ago, a medical NGO convoy was ambushed in a disputed border region, Hartford said. 12 Americans, 8 local staff. They were running a mobile clinic providing trauma care to civilians caught in crossfire. Olivia's chest tightened. Casualties? 3 confirmed dead, 9 wounded. The survivors are pinned down in a compound with limited supplies and no way out. The area is too hot for standard extraction. Hostile forces control the access roads. Air support's not an option without risking collateral damage. What do you need from me? Hartford pulled out another photograph. This one showed a woman in scrubs, maybe 30, blonde hair pulled back, blood on her shirt. This is Dr. Rachel Morrison. She's the senior physician on site. She's managing 9 trauma cases with whatever supplies survived the ambush. But she's not a combat medic. She's never worked under fire. And she's starting to break. Olivia stared at the photograph, seeing herself years ago in that woman's eyes. The fear masked as focus. The desperation masked as determination. You want me to go in, Olivia said. We want you to lead a rescue team. Get in, stabilize the wounded, coordinate extraction. You've done this before, multiple times. You know how to run trauma operations in hostile environments. That was years ago. Muscle memory doesn't expire. And you're the only physician assistant within reach who has both the medical expertise and the operational clearance for this mission. Hartford leaned forward. Dr. Morrison is 28 years old. This was her first field deployment. She's watching people die and she doesn't know how to stop it. She needs someone who's been there, someone who knows how to function when everything's on fire. The words hit like an echo of what Olivia had told Mareno, what she'd told herself 1,000 times. When do we go? She asked. Wheels up at 1400. Mission briefing starts in 30 minutes. You'll meet the extraction team, review the compound layout, and receive updated intel. He paused. This is voluntary, Captain. I can't order you to do this, but I'm asking. Olivia looked at the photograph of Dr. Morrison again, at the blood on her scrubs, at the exhaustion in her posture, at the weight of responsibility that was clearly crushing her. She'd been that person. She'd stood in those shoes, and someone had shown up for her. I'm in, Olivia said. Hartford nodded and stood. The other officers followed suit. They led her down another corridor to a larger briefing room where a tactical team waited. 12 operators in multicam fatigues bristling with weapons and equipment. Their team leader stepped forward, a major, late 30s, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. Captain Brennan, Major Kyle Preston, I'll be running security for this op. What's the threat profile? Fluid. We've got hostile militias, opportunistic bandits, and at least one organized group with heavy weapons. They know Americans are in that compound. They're waiting for us to try something stupid. So we're going to do something smart instead. Preston smiled. That's the idea. For the next 4 hours, Olivia absorbed intel faster than she'd thought possible. Compound layouts, casualty reports, supply inventories, hostile force positions, extraction routes, contingency plans for when everything went sideways. She met the trauma team she'd be working with, 2 Navy corpsmen with deployment experience and a civilian surgeon who'd volunteered for the mission. They reviewed medical protocols, discussed priority triage, calculated supply needs down to the last IV bag. At 1300, they suited up. Body armor, helmets, medical gear packed into assault packs that weighed 40 pounds and felt like responsibility made solid. At 1345, they boarded a C-130 configured for long-range insertion. The interior smelled like jet fuel and gun oil, and the particular brand of tension that came before combat operations. The engines roared. The aircraft lifted off, climbing into afternoon sky. Olivia sat among the operators, medical gear between her knees, and felt the old rhythms coming back. The focus, the clarity, the way time slowed down and sped up simultaneously when lives hung in the balance. Major Preston sat across from her. You good, Captain? Ask me when we're on the ground. Fair enough. He checked his weapon, fingers moving through the motions with practiced ease. Hartford says you're the best at this. That true? I'm good at not letting people die when everyone else has given up. That'll do. The aircraft flew for 8 hours, refueling once over the Atlantic. Olivia dozed in fits, her mind already running through scenarios. Compound defense, casualty stabilization, priority evacuation, all the calculations that would matter when bullets started flying. They descended through darkness over a country whose name she wasn't allowed to know. The rear ramp dropped. Night air rushed in, hot and dry and full of sand. 30 seconds, the loadmaster called. The team stood as one, checking gear, checking each other. Preston gave hand signals. The operators moved into formation. The aircraft touched down on a desert airstrip lit only by infrared markers. The ramp hit sand and they were moving, fast and low, toward vehicles waiting in the darkness. Olivia ran with them, her medical pack bouncing against her spine, muscle memory guiding her through movements she hadn't made in 6 years. They piled into armored trucks. Engines started. They drove into the desert with lights off, navigating by GPS and night vision, racing toward a compound where 9 wounded Americans were running out of time. Preston spoke into his radio, coordinating with air support somewhere above. Echo 1 to Overwatch. We're 20 minutes out. Status on the compound? Static, then. Overwatch to Echo 1. Compound's under sporadic fire. No direct assault yet, but hostiles are probing defenses. Recommend fast approach. Copy that. Echo 1 out. He looked at Olivia. When we hit that compound, I need you to assess casualties and give me a priority list. Who can move, who needs stabilization, who we carry out first. Understood. And Captain, if this goes loud, you stay with the wounded. That's an order. I know how this works, Major. The trucks ate up miles of desert, kicking up dust that hung in the air like ghosts. Through the ballistic glass, Olivia could see the compound ahead, a cluster of buildings surrounded by walls, lit by emergency lights that flickered and failed and flickered again. Gunfire crackled in the distance. Preston keyed his radio. All units were going in hot. Medical team stays center. Operators establish perimeter. Move fast, move smart, and nobody gets left behind. The trucks accelerated, closing the final distance. And then they were crashing through the compound gates, operators spilling out with weapons up, securing angles while Olivia sprinted toward the main building where the wounded waited. She burst through the door into a scene she'd seen too many times before. Makeshift trauma bay, blood on the floor, the smell of copper and fear, and bodies pushed past their limits. Doctor. Rachel Morrison looked up from a patient, her hands covered in blood, her eyes wild with exhaustion and relief. "You came," she whispered. "I'm here," Olivia said, dropping her pack and scanning the room. 9 casualties in various states of trauma, gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, one with a tension pneumothorax struggling to breathe. She fell into the rhythm without thinking. Triage, assess, prioritize. She said to Morrison. "Give me status on each patient. Start with the worst." Morrison rattled off conditions with the frayed precision of someone who'd been holding it together through sheer force of will. Olivia listened, calculated, made decisions. "Him first," she said, pointing to the pneumothorax. "We needle decompress now or he's dead in 10 minutes. You two," she gestured to the corpsmen, "start pushing fluids on the hypovolemic patients. Get lines in everyone who doesn't have them. Move." They moved. Olivia grabbed a needle decompression kit and went to work on the dying patient, her hands steady, even as gunfire echoed outside and the whole world tried to fall apart around her. But in that moment, surrounded by blood and chaos and people who needed her to be better than their situation, Olivia Brennan found the one thing she'd been searching for since Derek Mareno grabbed her arm in a coffee shop: purpose. And then the compound wall exploded inward and everything went to hell at once. The explosion tore through the compound's eastern wall with enough force to lift bodies off the ground and turn the makeshift trauma bay into a snow globe of dust and debris. Olivia felt the shockwave punch through her chest, felt her ears ring with the high-pitched whine that meant the world had gotten too loud too fast. She threw herself over the pneumothorax patient instinctively, shielding him with her body as chunks of concrete rained down and the emergency light shattered into darkness. For 3 seconds, nothing existed except ringing silence and the taste of powdered concrete. Then the world came back all at once. Gunfire erupted outside, the distinctive crack of American rifles answered by the heavier reports of AK pattern weapons. Someone was screaming. The patient beneath Olivia was gasping, his tension pneumothorax worse now from the concussive force. Dr. Morrison had been thrown against the wall and was trying to stand on legs that didn't want to cooperate. "Stay down," Olivia barked, her voice sounding muffled and distant through damaged hearing. She grabbed the needle decompression kit she'd dropped, found the landmark on the patient's chest by feel more than sight, and punched the catheter through the intercostal space in one practiced motion. The hiss of escaping air meant she'd hit the right spot. The patient's breathing eased fractionally. Major Preston appeared in the doorway, weapon up, face streaked with dust. "We've got a breach. Hostiles coming through the east wall. We're holding them, but barely. How fast can you move these patients?" Olivia scanned the room. 9 casualties, 3 critical, 6 ambulatory with assistance. Moving them all in the middle of a firefight was a logistics nightmare wrapped in a death sentence. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. "You've got 3. After that, we're overrun." He disappeared back into the chaos. Olivia turned to Morrison. "Can you walk?" Morrison nodded, still dazed but functional. "Then you're in charge of the ambulatory cases. Get them to the vehicles. Now. Don't wait for me." She pointed to the 2 Navy corpsmen. "You two help me with the criticals. We carry them out one at a time, fastest route to the trucks." They moved without questioning, grabbing the first critical, a woman with a through-and-through GSW to the abdomen and significant blood loss. Olivia took the head, the corpsman took the feet, and they lifted as one, carrying her through the doorway into hell. The compound was a war zone. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like strobe lights. Tracers cut through the air in lazy arcs that killed anyone unlucky enough to intersect them. Preston's operators had established a defensive line at the breach, trading fire with hostiles pushing through the gap, but the math wasn't in their favor. Too many attackers. Not enough defenders. Olivia ran low, legs burning, the patient's weight distributed across her shoulders. Rounds snapped past close enough to feel the displaced air. Someone to her left went down screaming. She kept moving because stopping meant dying, and dying meant the patient died too. They reached the armored trucks. Olivia and the corpsmen loaded the woman into the back, strapped her down, started an IV push to replace lost volume. "Next one," Olivia said, already turning back toward the building. The second critical was the pneumothorax patient. Still breathing, but barely. They carried him through the same gauntlet, the same bullets, the same impossible distances that felt like miles compressed into meters. Olivia's lungs burned, her vision tunneled. She'd forgotten how exhausting this was, the physical cost of saving lives while people tried to end them. They loaded him, turned back for the third. That's when the second explosion hit. This one was closer, inside the compound, and the concussive wave lifted Olivia off her feet and slammed her into the side of a truck hard enough to crack ribs. She hit the ground gasping, her chest screaming, vision swimming with black spots. One of the corpsmen was down, not moving. The other was crawling toward cover, blood streaming from his scalp. Olivia forced herself up. Broken ribs. Maybe 3. Definitely painful. But pain was just information, and right now she had a job to finish. She stumbled back toward the building through smoke so thick it was like moving through fog. Inside, Morrison had the ambulatory patients huddled in a corner, using her own body as a shield. The third critical, a man with a traumatic amputation below the knee, was still on the makeshift table where they'd left him, unconscious from blood loss and shock. "We have to move him now," Olivia said, her voice harsh from inhaled smoke and damaged ribs. Morrison helped her lift. Together they carried him out, moving slower than before because Morrison wasn't trained for this, and Olivia's ribs were grinding with every step. The compound was collapsing around them. Fires burned. The defensive line was being pushed back. Preston's voice crackled over radio channels, calling for air support, for extraction, for anything that would get them out alive. They reached the trucks, loaded the last critical. "Everyone in!" Preston shouted, appearing from the smoke like a ghost. His face was burned, his armor scorched. "We're leaving, right now." The ambulatory patients piled into trucks. Morrison climbed in. Olivia did a final head count and came up one short. "Where's Jackson?" she demanded. One of the corpsmen. "Didn't make it," Preston said flatly. "Neither did Rodriguez. We stay any longer. Nobody makes it. Get in the truck." Olivia climbed in beside the critical patients. The doors slammed. The trucks lurched forward, crashing back through the gates they'd entered, racing into the desert while the compound burned behind them and hostile fire chased their retreat. Inside the truck, Olivia worked on autopilot, checking vitals, adjusting IVs, keeping the criticals alive through sheer force of will and medical training that ran deeper than conscious thought. Morrison helped where she could, her hands shaking but steady enough. "How did you do this?" Morrison asked quietly. "How did you function like that?" "Practice," Olivia said. "Too much practice." They drove for 40 minutes before reaching the extraction point, a flat stretch of desert where 2 Black Hawks waited with rotors already spinning. The transfer was practice chaos. Critical patients loaded first, ambulatory second. The operators formed a perimeter, watching for pursuit that never came. Olivia climbed into the lead helicopter, positioning herself between the criticals, her hands never stopping their work. The aircraft lifted off, climbing into darkness, banking toward the border. Only then, with the ground falling away and relative safety wrapping around them, did Olivia let herself feel the cost. The broken ribs, the exhaustion, the weight of 2 dead operators who'd given their lives so 9 civilians could survive. She closed her eyes and focused on breathing through the pain. They flew for 3 hours, landing at a forward operating base where a full trauma team waited. Olivia supervised the handoff, made sure every detail of care transferred cleanly, watched as the criticals were wheeled into surgery with odds better than they'd had in that compound. Dr. Morrison stood beside her, still covered in dust and blood, watching the same thing. "They're gonna make it," Morrison said. "Because of you." "Because of all of us," Olivia corrected. "You held it together when it mattered. That counts." "I was terrified." "So was I." Morrison looked at her. "You didn't show it. That's the trick. Terror's fine. Panic will kill you. There's a difference." A medical officer approached, a colonel with 30 years of experience written into the lines around his eyes. "Captain Brennan, hell of a job out there. We've got a medical brief in 1 hour. Until then, get those ribs looked at and try to rest." "I'm fine." That wasn't a suggestion. Olivia let herself be led to an exam room where an Army physician assistant, young, competent, eerily similar to who Olivia had been years ago, palpated her ribcage with practiced hands and ordered x-rays that confirmed 3 fractured ribs without pneumothorax or hemothorax. "You're lucky," the PA said. "I don't feel lucky." "You're breathing. You're walking. In my book, that's lucky." She She wrapped Olivia's chest with an elastic bandage that provided compression without restricting breathing. Take these for pain. Don't do anything stupid like running or fighting or getting blown up for at least 6 weeks. I'll try. Olivia swallowed the pills dry and walked back into the controlled chaos of the forward operating base. Personnel moved with purpose. Helicopters came and went. The machinery of war ground forward with the same relentless momentum it always had. Major Preston found her outside the operations center. His burns had been treated, his face now covered in white ointment that made him look ghostly in the floodlights. Lost 2 good men tonight, he said without preamble. I know. But we saved 9. That's the math. That's what we tell ourselves. Does it help? Sometimes. He looked at her. You were right in the thick of it. Not many medical personnel can do that. Most freeze. I had good teachers. Yeah, so did I. He paused. There's a transport back to Andrews leaving at 0600. You're on it. They want you back in Washington for debrief. Olivia nodded, too tired to argue. She spent what remained of the night in transient quarters, a plywood box with a cot and a blanket. She didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling and counted her breaths and thought about all the ways the night could have gone worse. At 0530, she showered, changed into clean fatigue someone had left for her, and walked to the airstrip where a C-17 waited with engines already running. The flight back was longer than the flight out. Olivia dozed in fits, her ribs aching despite the medication, her mind cycling through the mission on endless repeat. The explosion, the gunfire, the weight of bodies she'd carried through hell, the faces of patients who'd lived because she'd been there. They landed at Andrews 18 hours after leaving the compound. Olivia walked down the ramp into morning sunlight that felt surreal after the desert darkness and found Colonel Hartford waiting with Agent Vance beside him. Captain, Hartford said, welcome home. Sir, you did exceptional work. All 9 patients survived. The surgeon at Landstuhl says the amputee would have bled out in another hour if you hadn't gotten him out when you did. I was just doing my job. Your job involved getting blown up twice and still completing the mission. That's above and beyond. He gestured toward a waiting vehicle. We need to debrief. Then you're taking medical leave whether you like it or not. They drove to the same windowless building Olivia had been briefed in days ago. The conference room held different faces this time. Pentagon brass, intelligence analysts, a stenographer recording everything. For 3 hours, Olivia walked them through the mission in excruciating detail. Timeline, casualties, tactical decisions, the explosions, the firefight, every choice that led to 9 people living instead of dying. When it was over, Hartford dismissed everyone except Vance. There's something you need to know, he said once the room cleared. While you were deployed, the situation in Ashford Heights evolved. Olivia's stomach tightened. Mareno? He's physically stable, but the investigation expanded. Internal Affairs found a pattern. Vance pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Olivia. The screen showed a spreadsheet, dates, names, incident summaries, dozens of entries. Mareno's been doing this for years, Vance said. Not the exact same thing, but variations on a theme. Aggressive stops, questionable searches, disproportionate force against people who looked suspicious. Your case was just the one that got recorded. Olivia scanned the list. 23 separate incidents over 4 years, different victims. Same pattern. They're filing formal charges, Hartford said. Civil rights violations, abuse of authority, deprivation of rights under color of law. He's looking at federal prosecution and significant prison time. He tried to kill himself, Olivia said quietly. Isn't that punishment enough? That's for a judge to decide. But the victims, the other victims, they deserve justice too. Your case opened the door. Now they're walking through it. Olivia thought about the spreadsheet. 23 people who'd been grabbed, searched, intimidated, violated by someone who thought a badge gave him the right. 23 stories that might never have been heard if she hadn't walked into Morrison's cafe at exactly the wrong moment. What about the video? She asked. Still viral. 40 million views and counting. You're a household name whether you want to be or not. I don't. Too bad. Vance closed the tablet. Senator Whitmore is still pushing for testimony. The media wants interviews. Your hospital's getting calls about you every hour. You can't go back to your old life, Olivia. That door's closed. Then what am I supposed to do? Hartford leaned forward. You have options. The Army wants you back. Full reinstatement, promotion to major, assignment to Special Operations Medical Command. You'd be training the next generation of combat medics. I left for a reason. I know, but reasons change. You just proved you still have the skills. The question is whether you want to use them. Olivia looked at her hands. They were steady now, but she could still feel the phantom weight of patience she'd carried, could still smell the smoke and blood and fear. I need time, she said. Take it. You're on medical leave for the next month. Use it to figure out what comes next. Hartford stood. For what it's worth, Captain, I think you belong back in uniform. You're too good at this to waste on civilian nursing. Civilian nursing saved just as many lives. Fair point. But civilian nursing doesn't let you save lives in war zones, and there are always war zones. He left. Vance remained studying Olivia with that unreadable federal agent expression. There's one more thing. What? Derek Mareno wants to see you. He's asking for a meeting. Absolutely not. I told him you'd say that, but he's persistent. Says he has something he needs to tell you, something that changes the narrative. Nothing changes the narrative. He abused his authority. He's facing consequences. That's the whole story. Maybe, but he seems to think there's more to it. Vance paused. I'm not saying you should meet with him. I'm saying he's asking. What you do with that information is your call. My call is no. Noted. I'll let him know. Vance left. Olivia sat alone in the conference room, staring at her reflection in the polished table surface. She looked older, harder, like someone who'd lived several lifetimes in the span of a week. Her phone buzzed. She'd turned it on for the first time since leaving Ashford Heights, and now messages flooded in, hundreds of them. News outlets, random strangers, supporters, critics, people who wanted pieces of her story to use for their own purposes. One message stood out, from Marcus. Heard you did some crazy shit overseas. Drinks when you're stateside? She typed back, maybe, still processing. His response came immediately. Take your time, but don't disappear. People need to see what good looks like. Olivia pocketed the phone and walked out of the building into afternoon sunshine. Agent Vance had arranged temporary quarters on base, a VIP suite designed for visiting brass that felt absurdly luxurious after plywood transient quarters. She spent 2 days there doing nothing, sleeping, healing, watching the news coverage of herself like it was happening to someone else. The story had expanded beyond the initial arrest. Now it included her deployment, the rescue mission, the wounded she'd saved. Commentators debated her motives, her service record, what it all meant for civil-military relations. She ignored all of it. On the third day, Dr. Mendez called. Brennan, how are you holding up? I've been better. I've been worse. That's disturbingly vague. Mendez paused. Listen, we need you back. The hospital's getting crushed. We're short-staffed, and the patients keep asking for you. When are you coming home? Home. The word felt strange now. Ashford Heights wasn't home. It was just a place she'd worked, a place that felt very far away from who she was becoming. I don't know, Olivia said honestly. We'll figure it out soon. Your shifts are covered for another week. After that, I need a decision. I'll call you. She hung up and stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of choices pressing down. Army or civilian, public or private, the person she'd been or the person she was becoming. Her phone rang again. This time it was a blocked number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Captain Brennan? A woman's voice, young, uncertain. Who is this? My name is Jessica Marks. I was one of the people on Officer Mareno's list. He stopped me 2 years ago, searched my car, made me feel like a criminal when I was just driving home from work. Olivia sat up. Why are you calling me? Because I saw what happened to you. I saw you stay calm. I saw you refuse to let him break you. And I thought maybe I could do that too. Testify, I mean. Tell my story. You should. You absolutely should. I'm scared. That's normal. But you're not alone. There are 22 other people on that list. You could testify together. Would you be there? The question caught Olivia off guard. Why would I be there? Because you started this. You made it okay to speak up. And if you're there, maybe I'll be brave enough to follow through. Olivia closed her eyes. She'd spent 6 years trying to be invisible, trying to blend in, trying to live a quiet life. And in 1 week, she had become the exact opposite. A symbol, a catalyst, the person other people looked to for courage they thought they didn't have. If you testify, Olivia said carefully, I'll be there. You have my word. Jessica's breath caught. Thank you. That means everything. She hung up. Olivia sat with the phone in her hand, feeling the trajectory of her life bending in a direction she couldn't control. She'd gone into Morrison's cafe for coffee and walked out into a firestorm that had consumed her privacy, her anonymity, her carefully constructed normal life. But maybe normal was overrated. Maybe some people weren't meant for quiet. She called Agent Vance. I'll meet with Mareno, Olivia said, but on my terms, recorded, with witnesses, and he gets exactly 10 minutes. I'll set it up. 2 days later, Olivia walked into a conference room at the Ashford Heights Police Department for the second time. Chief Garrett was there, Agent Vance, a federal prosecutor, and Derek Mareno, looking like he'd aged 20 years in a week. He sat across from her, hands folded on the table, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. You asked to see me, Olivia said. Talk. Mareno swallowed hard. I need you to know something about that day, about why I stopped you. I know why. I look suspicious to you. We've covered this. No, there's more. He glanced at Chief Garrett, who nodded permission. I'd gotten a tip. Anonymous call that morning. Someone said there was a woman matching your description selling prescription drugs out of Morrison's cafe. That's why I was there. That's why I approached you. Olivia went very still. Someone set me up? I think so. The call came from a burner phone, untraceable, but it was specific enough to seem credible. Hair color, clothing, time, and location, everything matched. Why are you telling me this now? Because Internal Affairs found something during their investigation, a pattern of anonymous tips targeting specific individuals. All of them women, all of them in healthcare, all of them reported by the same voice. The prosecutor leaned forward. We believe someone's been using police resources to harass medical personnel. Mareno was a tool. So were 3 other officers across the state. The calls always came before shift changes, always targeted people during vulnerable moments. Olivia's mind raced through implications. Who? We don't know yet, but we're close. The prosecutor slid a photograph across the table. Do you recognize this woman? Olivia looked at the image. It showed someone in scrubs, maybe 40, with sharp features and eyes that looked familiar in a way she couldn't place. I've seen her, Olivia said slowly, at Mercy Ridge. I think she works in administration. Her name is Lauren Vickers. She was passed over for the head trauma nurse position 6 months ago. The position went to someone you recommended. The pieces clicked into place. Vickers had been furious about that decision, had filed a formal complaint claiming bias. The complaint had been dismissed. Apparently, she'd decided to take matters into her own hands. She's been targeting people in the trauma department, Olivia said, using cops to do her dirty work. That's our theory. We're building a case now, but we need you to testify when it goes to trial. Olivia looked at Mareno. You were played. I know. Doesn't excuse what I did, but it explains part of it. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry for all of it, for not questioning the tip, for not treating you like a human being, for everything. Your apology doesn't undo the damage. I know, but it's a start. Olivia stood. I'll testify, against you and against whoever orchestrated this, because the truth matters more than my comfort. She walked out, leaving Mareno sitting there with the weight of consequences he'd earned. Outside, Agent Vance caught up to her. That took guts. No, that was just necessary. Where to now? Olivia thought about Jessica Marks, about the 22 other victims, about Dr. Morrison holding it together in a war zone, about all the people who needed someone to show them that quiet strength could still win. Back to Washington, she said. I have a senator to talk to. Senator Whitmore's office was exactly what Olivia expected, power and polish wrapped in mahogany and leather. The senator herself sat behind a desk that looked like it weighed more than a car, watching Olivia with sharp, assessing eyes. Captain Brennan. I'm told you're reconsidering my offer. I'll testify. But not about my arrest, about the system that allowed it to happen 23 times before someone finally paid attention. Whitmore smiled. Even better. When can you start preparing? I already have. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In that time, Olivia did what she did best. Prepared, planned, rehearsed every detail until nothing could surprise her. She met with the other victims, coordinated testimony, built a narrative that was bigger than any single incident. The day of the hearing, she walked into the Senate chamber in civilian clothes. Dark suit, no makeup, nothing to hide behind. Cameras lined the walls. The gallery was packed, every seat filled with journalists, advocates, and people who'd lived through similar stories. Olivia took her seat at the witness table. Senator Whitmore called the session to order. Captain Brennan, thank you for being here. Can you tell us what happened on the morning of your arrest? Olivia leaned toward the microphone, and she told them everything. Not just her story, but the stories of 23 other people, the pattern, the abuse, the system that protected bad actors until public outrage forced accountability. She spoke for 40 minutes without notes, without emotion, just clinical precision and devastating detail. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then Jessica Marks stood up in the gallery and started clapping. Others joined. The applause built like a wave, filling the space with sound that felt like validation, like justice, like the beginning of something that couldn't be stopped. Olivia sat there, hands folded, and felt the weight she'd been carrying finally start to lift. But in the back of the chamber, partially hidden in shadow, a figure watched with eyes that promised this wasn't over. Lauren Vickers had made her first mistake. She was about to make her last. Lauren Vickers disappeared into the crowd before Olivia could get a clear look at her face, but the damage was done. Agent Vance had seen her too, along with 3 Capitol police officers who'd been briefed on exactly who to watch for. They moved through the gallery with practiced efficiency, cutting off exits, tightening the net around someone who'd spent months thinking she was untouchable. Olivia watched from the witness table as Vance's hand went to her earpiece, as she spoke quick words into her radio, as the machinery of federal law enforcement activated with the quiet precision of a trap snapping shut. The applause was still echoing through the chamber when Vance caught Olivia's eye and gave a single nod. They had her. Senator Whitmore called for order, her gavel echoing like a gunshot. The gallery settled reluctantly, people still buzzing with the energy of Olivia's testimony. Journalists were already typing, their fingers flying across keyboards, racing to be first with a story that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Captain Brennan, Whitmore said, her voice carrying the weight of institutional authority. On behalf of this committee, I want to thank you for your courage in coming forward. Your testimony will inform legislation that protects veterans and holds law enforcement accountable. This matters. Thank you, Senator. Olivia stood, her ribs protesting the movement but manageable now. But I didn't do this alone. 23 other people are waiting to tell their stories. Make sure you listen to all of them. We will. You have my word. Olivia walked out of the chamber into a hallway packed with reporters shouting questions she didn't answer. Vance was waiting by the elevators, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating something that sounded urgent. They've got Vickers in a holding room downstairs, Vance said when she hung up. She tried to run, made it about 30 feet before Capitol Police tackled her in the rotunda. Very dramatic. Cameras caught everything. Good. Let people see what accountability looks like. You want to watch the interrogation? Olivia thought about it. Part of her wanted to see Vickers face the consequences of weaponizing police resources for personal vendettas. But another part, the part that was exhausted and healing and ready for this chapter to close, just wanted to be done. No, she said, I've seen enough. They took an elevator down to the basement level where federal vehicles waited to transport witnesses back to secure locations. But before they reached the garage, a door opened and Colonel Hartford stepped out. Captain, a word? Olivia followed him into a small office that smelled like recycled air and old coffee. Hartford closed the door and gestured to a chair. I watched your testimony on the live stream, he said. Powerful stuff. You made an impact. I told the truth, that's all. The truth delivered with precision and credibility. That's leadership. He sat across from her. I'm not going to waste your time with small talk. The Army wants you back. Not just back. They want you running the combat medic training program at Fort Bragg. You'd be shaping the next generation of field medical personnel, teaching them everything you know. Olivia's chest tightened. Fort Bragg, special operations, the beating heart of everything she'd left behind. That's a significant position. It is. And you're the only person qualified who also has recent combat experience and the public credibility to make the program matter. Politicians will fund what gets attention. Right now you have all the attention. I need time to think. You have 72 hours. After that, the offer goes to someone else. Hartford stood. For what it's worth, I think you belong back in uniform. But that's your decision to make. He left. Olivia sat alone in the office, staring at the wall and trying to imagine what her life would look like in either direction. Back to Mercy Ridge and the quiet anonymity of civilian nursing. Or back to Fort Bragg and the weight of responsibility that came with training people who'd carry her lessons into war zones. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Mendez. Saw your testimony. Incredible. But we still need you here. Patient load is crushing us. When are you coming back? Another text, this one from Marcus. Fort Bragg, huh? Heard through the grapevine. Do it. You're wasted on civilian nursing. Another from Jessica Marks. Thank you for being there. I testified right after you. I was shaking the whole time, but I did it. Because you showed me how. Olivia stared at the messages, each one pulling her in different directions, each one representing a version of who she could be. The door opened again. This time it was Agent Vance. Vickers is talking, she said without preamble. Singing like she's auditioning for Broadway. She admitted to making the anonymous calls. Admitted to targeting medical personnel at Mercy Ridge. Admitted to using police resources to harass people she had professional grudges against. Why? Because she felt overlooked, undervalued, passed over for promotion she thought she deserved. So she decided to make life difficult for anyone she perceived as competition. Vance leaned against the door frame. She specifically targeted you because you recommended someone else for the head trauma nurse position. She'd been planning to escalate for months. The call about you dealing drugs was just the opening move. What happens to her now? Federal charges, conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law, abuse of police resources, witness intimidation. She's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted, which she will be because she confessed on camera. Olivia absorbed that. 15 to 20 years. A life destroyed by choices made out of bitterness and entitlement. What about Mareno? Still facing federal charges. But his cooperation in identifying the pattern helped the investigation. Prosecutor might offer a plea deal. Reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against Vickers. Will he take it? Probably. He's got nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Vance paused. He asked about you again. Wanted to know if you'd ever forgive him. What did you tell him? I told him forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. And he's got a long way to go. Olivia stood, her ribs protesting but manageable. I need to go back to Ashford Heights. There's something I have to do. The flight back was short and turbulent, the small charter plane bouncing through weather systems that matched Olivia's mood. She landed at the regional airport just after sunset, the sky streaked with orange and purple like a bruise healing in reverse. A rental car waited. She drove through familiar streets that felt foreign now, past Morrison's Cafe where it had all started, past Mercy Ridge Medical Center where her colleagues were finishing another brutal shift. She pulled into the hospital parking lot and sat in the car, watching people come and go. Nurses in scrubs, doctors in white coats, patients in wheelchairs, the ordinary machinery of healthcare grinding forward because someone had to keep people alive. Doctor. Mendez emerged from the main entrance, spotted Olivia's car, and walked over. She knocked on the window. Olivia rolled it down. You're back, Mendez said. Please tell me you're here to pick up shifts. I need to talk to you about something. They walked inside to Mendez's office, a cluttered space filled with medical journals and coffee mugs from conferences nobody remembered attending. Mendez closed the door and sat behind her desk. Talk, she said. I'm not coming back, Olivia said. Not permanently. Mendez's face fell. The Army? Maybe. Probably. I don't know yet. But even if I turn them down, I can't go back to pretending I'm just a regular nurse. Too much has changed. You were never just a regular nurse. You were the best trauma nurse in this hospital. Mendez leaned forward. What can I do to change your mind? Nothing. This isn't about you or the hospital. It's about me figuring out who I'm supposed to be now that invisible isn't an option anymore. Mendez was quiet for a long moment. I hate this. I hate losing you. But I get it. You outgrew this place the moment that video went viral. It's not about outgrowing stuff. Yes, it is, and that's okay. People are allowed to evolve. Just don't forget where you came from. Olivia felt emotion tighten her throat. Mendez had been more than a supervisor. She'd been a mentor, a friend, someone who'd given Olivia space to heal from wounds nobody could see. I won't forget, Olivia said. How could I? They hugged across the desk, awkward and genuine, and then Olivia left before the emotion could crack her composure completely. She drove through Ashford Heights one more time, past the neighborhoods where normal people lived normal lives. She thought about the apartment she'd rented, the life she'd built, the careful anonymity she'd maintained for 6 years. All of it felt like a costume she'd been wearing, comfortable, safe, but ultimately not who she actually was. She ended up at the Ashford Heights Police Department without consciously deciding to go there. The building was lit up against the darkness, windows glowing like eyes watching the city. She sat in the parking lot, debating whether this was a good idea. Then she saw Chief Garrett walking to his car, shoulders slumped with exhaustion that went deeper than one long shift. She got out and called to him. Chief? He turned, surprise flickering across his face. Captain Brennan, didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to come, but I need to ask you something. Shoot. Mareno, is he going to be okay? Garrett leaned against his car. Define okay. Physically? Yeah. He's out of the hospital, staying with his sister. Mentally? He shrugged. He's in therapy. Facing federal charges, his career's over, his reputation's destroyed, but he's alive. That's something. Did he mean it? The apology? I think so. But meaning it doesn't erase what he did, doesn't undo the harm. Garrett studied her. Why do you care? Because I've seen what happens when people don't get a chance at redemption. They either give up completely or they double down on the worst parts of themselves. I don't want either of those outcomes for him. That's remarkably generous considering he arrested you for drinking coffee. It's not generous. It's strategic. Mareno screwed up. Vickers manipulated him. The system enabled both of them. If we only punish without allowing growth, nothing actually gets better. Garrett nodded slowly. You sound like someone who's thought about leadership. I had good teachers. The Army's lucky to have you back, if that's where you're going. How did you know? Because I recognized the look. My son had it before he deployed. That sense of purpose that civilian life can't quite provide. Garrett straightened. Whatever you decide, you made a difference here. People are paying attention now. Policies are changing. That matters. Olivia shook his hand. Thank you for doing the right thing, when you could have covered for your officer. I learned a long time ago that loyalty to the badge means nothing if you're disloyal to what the badge is supposed to represent. She drove back to her apartment in the Carver district and spent the night packing up 6 years of civilian life into boxes labeled for storage. Books, clothes, the few possessions she'd accumulated, everything that represented the person she'd been trying to become. At 3 a.m, she sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and called Marcus. He answered immediately, voice clear despite the hour. Talk to me. I'm taking the Fort Bragg position. Damn right you are. I'm terrified. Good. Terror means it matters. When did you decide? About 30 seconds ago. Marcus laughed. That's the Olivia I remember. Jump first, figure out the parachute on the way down. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not who they think I am? You just saved 9 people in a combat zone while getting blown up twice. You testified in front of the Senate. You took down a corrupt nurse and exposed systemic police abuse. You're exactly who they think you are. You're just the last one to realize it. Olivia closed her eyes. I needed to hear that. I know. That's why you called. He paused. Welcome back, Captain. She hung up and sat in the darkness, letting the decision settle into her bones. Fort Bragg. Training the next generation. Teaching people who'd carry her lessons into the worst places on Earth. It felt right, in a way nothing had felt right in 6 years. At 0600, she called Colonel Hartford. "I'm in," she said when he answered. "When do I start?" 2 weeks. That gives you time to wrap up loose ends. Welcome back to the fight, Captain." She spent the next week closing chapters. She gave Mercy Ridge her formal resignation, worked her final shifts, said goodbye to colleagues who'd become friends. She attended the second round of Senate hearings where Jessica Marks and the other victims testified with the kind of courage that comes from watching someone else go first. She watched on a courtroom monitor as Lauren Vickers was arraigned on federal charges, her face blank with the shock of consequences she'd never seen coming. The judge denied bail. Vickers was remanded to federal custody pending trial. Derek Mareno accepted a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison, in exchange for testimony against Vickers and cooperation with the civil rights investigation. He'd served 3 with good behavior. When he was sentenced, Olivia was in the courtroom gallery. He saw her there. Their eyes met across the space. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just witnessed his accountability the way he'd needed to witness hers. The Ashford Heights Police Department implemented sweeping reforms. Body cameras made mandatory. De-escalation training required. Anonymous tip protocols completely overhauled. Chief Garrett appeared on national news, explaining how one viral video had forced them to examine practices they'd overlooked for years. Morrison's Cafe put up a plaque by the table where Olivia had been sitting. The owner, a quiet man who'd watched the whole thing unfold, insisted despite her protests. It read, "On this spot, Olivia Brennan showed us that quiet strength is still strength. She visited it once before leaving Ashford Heights, sat at that same table, ordered a cappuccino that tasted exactly the same." People recognized her now. Some approached asking for photos. Others just nodded with respect that felt heavier than praise. She finished her coffee, left a generous tip, and walked out into the city that had tried to make her invisible and ended up making her impossible to ignore. The drive to Fort Bragg took 8 hours. Olivia made it in 7, pushing the rental car faster than necessary because sitting still meant thinking and thinking meant second-guessing, and she was done with doubt. The base sprawled across North Carolina like a small city dedicated to making warriors. She showed her orders at the gate. The MP scanned them, snapped a salute that she returned, and waved her through. She drove to the Special Operations Medical Training Battalion headquarters, a modern facility that smelled like fresh paint and institutional coffee. Colonel Hartford met her in the lobby. "Captain Brennan, welcome home." "Sir." He walked her through the facility, showing her classrooms equipped with the latest simulation technology, trauma bays designed to replicate field conditions, equipment that would have seemed like science fiction during her deployments. "This is yours now," Hartford said, gesturing to an office with her name already on the door. "You build the curriculum. You select the instructors. You train people who'll save lives in places most Americans will never know exist." Olivia stepped into the office. It was sparse, functional, a desk, a computer, windows overlooking the training grounds where soldiers ran morning PT in the pre-dawn darkness. "When do I meet the students?" she asked. "Tomorrow. First class starts at 0700. 48 students, all volunteers, all highly motivated, all waiting to learn from the medic who became a legend." "I'm not a legend." "Tell them that. They've all seen the video. They know your record. You're going to have to earn their respect by being better than the myth." "I can do that." Hartford handed her a folder. "Roster, personnel files, medical histories. Study them tonight. Tomorrow you start shaping the future." He left her alone in the office. Olivia sat behind the desk and opened the folder, scanning names and faces of people who'd volunteered to learn the hardest job in the military, keeping people alive when everything was designed to kill them. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Morrison, the physician she'd rescued from the compound. "Heard you're training the next generation. They're lucky to have you. Don't let them forget what you taught me. Terror is fine, panic will kill you." Another text from Jessica Marks. "Vickers got denied bail. Trials in 3 months. Will you be there?" Olivia typed back. "I'll be there. You're not doing this alone." A final text from Agent Vance. "Congratulations on the new position. Try not to get blown up this time." Olivia smiled and set the phone aside. She spent the rest of the day reviewing files, building lesson plans, designing a curriculum that would prepare people for realities that couldn't be fully taught, only experienced and survived. At 1800 hours, she drove to the visiting officers' quarters, where temporary housing waited. The room was small but clean, with a bed that didn't sag and a shower with water pressure that actually worked. She unpacked her duffel bag, hanging uniforms in the closet with the precise spacing she'd learned years ago. The military medical tag she'd worn in the cafe, the one Mareno had dismissed as a prop, now hung from a rearview mirror where she could see it every day. That night, she slept better than she had in years. At 06:30 the next morning, she stood in front of 48 students in a classroom designed to look like a field hospital. They were young, eager, terrified in ways they didn't know how to articulate yet. Olivia looked at them and saw herself years ago, raw, unproven, convinced she was ready for things she couldn't possibly understand. "I'm Captain Olivia Brennan," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned every word. "Some of you know my story. Most of you have seen the video. None of that matters in this room. What matters is whether you have the discipline to function when everything is on fire, whether you can make life or death decisions in seconds, whether you can carry the weight of people who trusted you to bring them home." She paused, letting the words settle. "This training will break some of you. That's intentional. Because if you break here, in a controlled environment, you won't break there, where breaking means people die. I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to make sure that when you're standing in a field hospital under fire with 3 critical patients and no backup, you know exactly what to do." The students stared at her with the mix of fear and respect that came from recognizing someone who'd lived what they were only beginning to imagine. "First lesson," Olivia continued. "Terror is fine. Panic will kill you. There's a difference. Learn it now, because when mortars start falling and the casualties start coming, you won't have time to figure it out." She spent the next 4 hours teaching them triage protocols, demonstrating techniques on simulation mannequins, walking them through scenarios that got progressively more complex and chaotic. By the lunch break, 3 students had dropped out. By the end of the first week, 7 more followed. The remaining 38 got better, faster, more precise. Olivia pushed them harder than anyone had pushed her, and when they succeeded, she pushed them further. She taught them to function without sleep, to prioritize when everything felt critical, to make impossible choices and live with the consequences. She taught them what books couldn't, that medicine in combat zones wasn't about perfect technique. It was about doing good enough in terrible conditions and accepting that sometimes good enough was all you could offer. 3 months into the training cycle, Senator Whitmore's veterans legislation passed the Senate with bipartisan support. It included provisions for better transition support, enhanced medical services, and accountability measures for law enforcement interactions with former service members. Olivia watched the vote on C-SPAN during a lunch break, surrounded by students who cheered like they'd won something personal. "That's because of you," one of them said. A corporal named Davidson who'd survived an IED blast and wanted to learn how to save others. "That's because of everyone who testified," Olivia corrected. "I just went first." 4 months in, the trial of Lauren Vickers began. Olivia flew to Washington on a weekend pass wearing her dress uniform and sat in the courtroom gallery while prosecutors laid out a pattern of abuse that spanned 3 years and targeted 17 people. Jessica Marks testified. So did 9 others, each one stronger than the last because they'd watched each other find courage. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Vickers showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but Olivia saw something flicker in her eyes. The recognition that consequences were real and justice, though slow, was still possible. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. 18 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for at least 12. Olivia wasn't there for the sentencing. She was at Fort Bragg, running a field exercise where her students had to manage mass casualties during a simulated ambush. They performed with the precision she drilled into them, saving 19 of 20 simulated patients. When it was over, she gathered them in the debriefing room. "One patient died," she said. "Why?" The students reviewed the scenario, identified the decision points, traced the failure back to a missed assessment during initial triage. "How do you prevent it next time?" Olivia asked. They workshopped solutions, refined protocols, built contingency plans. "Good," Olivia said. "But understand something. In real operations, you'll do everything right and people will still die. That's not failure. That's the reality of medicine in combat. Your job isn't to save everyone. Your job is to give everyone the best possible chance. Some chances won't be enough. You have to make peace with that or it'll destroy you. She dismissed them. One student stayed behind, Davidson. Captain, can I ask you something? Go ahead. When you were deployed, did you ever lose someone you thought you could save? The question hit like a punch. Olivia thought about a 19-year-old rifleman in Kandahar who'd bled out despite her best efforts, a convoy driver in Mosul who'd coded on the table, a translator in Helmand who'd survived the ambush but died from complications hours later. Yes, she said, multiple times. How did you keep going? By remembering that the ones who lived needed me just as much as the ones who didn't. Grief is real, but the mission doesn't stop for grief. You process it later, in pieces, when you have the luxury of falling apart safely. Davidson nodded, filing the answer away with all the other difficult truths he was learning. 6 months into her tenure at Fort Bragg, Olivia received a letter forwarded through military mail. The return address was a federal correctional facility. The sender was Derek Mareno. She almost threw it away unopened, but something made her read it. The letter was short, handwritten on lined paper that felt cheap and institutional. Captain Brennan, I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know that what you said during my sentencing hearing about redemption requiring more than regret has stayed with me. I'm taking classes, working on myself, trying to become someone who wouldn't make the mistakes I made. You were right. I was scared of being wrong, scared of losing control, scared of admitting I didn't have all the answers. That fear made me dangerous. I see that now. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make amends, but I'm trying, because you showed me that accountability isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. Thank you for that. Derek Mareno. Olivia read it twice, then filed it away in a drawer with other things she wasn't ready to process. Maybe someday she'd respond. Maybe not. But the fact that he was trying mattered in ways she couldn't quite articulate. 8 months in, her students graduated. 41 had started. 38 were finishing. 3 had dropped out for reasons that ranged from medical to personal. But the 38 who remained were the best combat medics Olivia had ever trained. The graduation ceremony was held on a Friday morning in early summer. Family members filled the bleachers. Brass sat in the front row. Olivia stood at attention while each graduate received their certificate and the combat medic badge they'd earned. When it was over, Colonel Hartford approached her. "Best training cycle we've ever had," he said. "Lowest attrition rate, highest performance scores, fastest field response times. You exceeded every metric. The students did the work. You set the standard. There's a difference." He paused. "We're expanding the program, adding 2 more training cycles per year. I need someone to oversee all of it. Promoted to major. Full autonomy. Interested?" Olivia looked at the graduates standing with their families, their faces bright with accomplishment and the nervous excitement of people about to face realities they'd only simulated. "Yes," she said. "I'm interested." That evening, she drove into town and found a quiet bar where special operations personnel went to decompress. Marcus was waiting at a corner table, 2 beers already ordered. "Major Brennan," he said when she sat down, "has a nice ring to it. Don't jinx it. I haven't accepted yet." "You will, because you've finally stopped running from who you actually are." They drank in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd seen too much to need constant conversation. "You hear about Mareno?" Marcus asked eventually. "He wrote me a letter." "You respond?" "Not yet. Maybe never. I haven't decided." "That's fair. Forgiveness isn't required, just healing." Olivia thought about healing, about the broken ribs that had mended, about the career she'd lost and rebuilt, about the identity she'd hidden and reclaimed. "I think I'm finally there," she said. "Healed enough to move forward instead of just surviving." "Good. The world needs more people who know how to function when everything's on fire." They finished their beers and parted ways in the parking lot. Olivia drove back to base through the North Carolina darkness, past training grounds where the next generation was sleeping before another day of learning to save lives in impossible conditions. She thought about Morrison's cafe and the coffee that had spilled, about the handcuffs and the humiliation and the moment she'd decided that quiet strength was still strength. About the compound explosion and the patients she'd carried through gunfire, about the Senate testimony and the legislation and the ripple effects of refusing to stay silent. She thought about all of it as pieces of a story that had started with being underestimated and ended with becoming impossible to ignore. When she reached her quarters, she sat at her desk and wrote an email accepting the promotion. Then she opened a blank document and started writing something else, a training manual based on everything she'd learned. Not just the medical protocols, but the mental frameworks, the ways to stay human in inhuman situations, the difference between terror and panic, the art of functioning when everything was on fire. She worked until dawn, her fingers flying across the keyboard, pouring years of experience into words that would outlive her deployments and train people she'd never meet. When the sun rose over Fort Bragg, painting the training grounds gold, Olivia saved the document and stood at her window watching soldiers begin their morning PT. Somewhere out there, her graduates were deploying to places she couldn't name. Somewhere out there, people were drinking coffee in cafes without fear of being grabbed by police who saw threats instead of humans. Somewhere out there, veterans were receiving better support because legislation had passed. Somewhere out there, Lauren Vickers was waking up in a prison cell, understanding that actions had consequences. And here, in this office, with her name on the door, Olivia Brennan, former captain, current Major Select combat medic who'd become a symbol without meaning to, was exactly where she belonged, not hiding, not invisible, not trying to be normal, just being precisely who she'd always been, finally in a place where that was enough. Her phone buzzed one last time. A text from Jessica Marks. Just got promoted at work. Head trauma nurse. Because someone showed me that being underestimated is just an opportunity to prove them wrong. Thank you for going first. Olivia smiled and typed back. Congratulations! Now go show them what quiet strength looks like. She set the phone down and turned back to her training manual, adding one final section. It was titled, When Everything is on Fire, A Field Guide to Functioning Under Pressure. The first line read, This is not a story about being a hero. This is a manual for staying human when the world tries to break you. The difference matters. And then she wrote everything she'd learned, everything she'd survived, everything she'd become. Because some people weren't meant to be invisible. Some people were meant to be the light that others followed out of darkness. Olivia Brennan had spent 6 years trying to be the first. Now she'd spend the rest of her life being the second. And that, finally, was enough.